Welcome to FPB's Meet the Candidates. This Cable 10 series allows you, the viewers, to get to know our local candidates a little better as we talk to them about issues that are important to us in the community. We've taken questions from social media, through email. We've talked to civic groups who have given us questions, and so we have a lot of important things to talk about, and it's good for our viewers to hear how our candidates want to weigh in on those. This is all leading up to the general election, which is on November 8th. And that's why we're here, to help get you informed before you go vote. Today, our guest is Phillip Shepherd, and he is running for Circuit Court Judge here in our area, and he currently serves as the judge. So let's give him the opportunity to tell us a little bit more about himself. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
All right. I'm glad that you're here.
Well, it's great to be here and to be with you and to be able to share a little bit with people of Franklin County about this race and a little bit about myself. So,
well, let's just jump right into it.
Okay, great. Well, of course, I grew up here in Frankfort and started the first grade at 2nd Street School and graduated from Frankfort High School. So all of my elementary and secondary education was here in Frankfort. And I think many people probably know my family. My dad was a minister, was the minister at the First Methodist Church on Washington Street in Frankfort, and my mom, of course, was very active in the community and a lot of different events, and very active as part of my dad's ministry at the church. Okay. So I grew up in in South Frankfort. I had two older sisters, both of whom graduated from Frankfort High and 2nd Street as well, and a younger brother who graduated from Franklin County. So growing up in Frankfort was a great experience for me, and I got the opportunity to really learn a lot about the importance of community in a town like Frankfort. So that was how we kind of started out, and our lives when I was a kid revolved around church and school. So like a lot of people here in Frankfort.
Right. So you currently serve as our circuit court judge. So tell us, how long have you been doing that, and what's to come? I know we discussed that it's an 8-year term, right?
Correct. Yeah. Circuit court judges and serve 8-year terms under our Constitution. And so I'm finishing up my second term. I was originally elected in 2006, and I've served since then. And the circuit court in Kentucky is the court of what they call general jurisdiction. So it basically is the court that handles all kinds of disputes. On the criminal side, our court deals with felony offenses. So those are the more serious crimes for which the penalty is to go to prison, whereas the district court deals with crimes for which the maximum term would be 12 months in the Franklin County Jail. So the more serious crimes all come through circuit court, and that's our criminal docket. And then our civil docket is composed of civil cases are primarily disputes over money, and if it involves more than $5,000, it comes to circuit court. And if it's less than $5,000, it goes to district court.
Okay.
But in Franklin County, we have kind of an unusual civil docket because we're the home of state government. And as the home of state government, we really end up spending a huge amount of our time on disputes involving government and public policy and legislation. So Franklin County, as the circuit court in the county where state government is headquartered, ends up having to adjudicate many, many disputes involving state government. And that really brings into play a lot of the constitutional protections that are so important in our system. Basically, the system of checks and balances to make sure that neither the governor nor the legislature goes too far in trying to assert power over things that the Constitution tells them to keep their hands off of. And we also kind of serve as the what I would Judge Wingate and I kind of call our court in many ways, it's the Court of Appeals for state government.
Okay.
So if you, if you're appealing a decision of the Public Service Commission about utility rates, that'll come to Franklin Circuit Court. Or if you're appealing an environmental permit, that'll, in most cases, come to Franklin Circuit Court.
Okay.
And all of the regulatory things which state government does, which, really affects almost every aspect of our lives, those kinds of appeals come to Franklin Circuit Court, and so we just deal with a broad array of important issues that deal with everyday life and also deal with business and industry and the regulation of the environment, and a lot of really challenging issues.
Sure. You talked about a lot of the issues that you deal with, and the cases, are around state government and things that are happening. A lot of times those might be political in nature.
Yeah.
And I know that as a judge, you say that, we don't do that, but
For a judicial office, it's really an obligation of the candidates to set party politics aside
Right.
and to decide cases according to the Constitution and the law, regardless of your political party. So, in order to emphasize that and in order to really, I think, fulfill the obligation that we have under the Constitution, my campaign has made a commitment that we're not going to accept any donations from elected officials or from political parties or the PACs they control, because it is so important for our courts to be independent. So we have in Franklin County really a long tradition of independent judges. And it started with the very first judge in the Franklin Circuit Court, who was Judge Henry Meigs, who was the judge in Frankfort when I was a kid growing up. And Judge Meigs was a Republican. But he was appointed by a Democratic governor. And Judge Meigs really established that tradition that the courts are independent and that you leave politics at the doorstep when you come in to argue your cases about the Constitution and the statutes in Franklin County. And I think really every judge that has followed Judge Meigs has tried to live up to that tradition. And certainly it's something that I try to do every day.
okay. So you do have an opponent in the general election. So what do you think distinguishes you from your opponent?
Well, I think the primary thing that distinguishes me from my opponent is experience. I have presided over this court for 16 years. So in the course of that 16 years, of course, I've dealt with every kind of issue that the court deals with jury trials by the dozen. And in many ways, judging is kind of like it's kind of like surgery. You don't want to go see a surgeon who's performing his first surgery if you've got an important procedure to be done. And I think it's the same way with trials. So I've got a whole lot more experience than my opponent. And of course, I had a lot of experience as a lawyer before I became a judge. So both in terms of trial experience and appellate experience. And in addition to that, I served in state government for 4 years as the Secretary of Natural Resources and Environmental Protection. So I've got experience as a government official who's had to run a large state agency and deal with the problems of budget and personnel and things of that nature. So I think it's given me a much better understanding of state government, which again is a large portion of our docket. But I think the primary thing that really, well, there's two things I think that really distinguish me from my opponent. One is the experience question, and then the other one is, again, my pledge that I'm not going to take donations from politicians and from political parties. And my opponent feels differently about that, and he has taken donations from elected officials and from his own political party.
So what do you consider a politician? I mean, do you consider yourself a politician?
Elected officials,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so are you a politician?
Well, I'm a politician when I'm on the ballot, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, I think our Constitution kind of recognizes that because as an elected official, normally elected officials are active in the political arena, but judges are limited in what they can do in the political arena, both by the Constitution and by the Code of Judicial Conduct. So as a sitting judge and as a candidate for judge, under the Code of Judicial Conduct, you're not supposed to endorse or participate in political campaigns for other offices. So we've got a lot of other races going on in Franklin County now, but as a sitting judge and as a judicial candidate, we're not allowed to endorse people or to work for other candidates in other elections. So
I got you. That seems daunting.
yeah, well, it's a challenge. Yeah.
Okay. Well, an important part of public service is community support. So can you share with me any civic organizations or nonprofits that you've had the opportunity to work with here in our community?
Yeah, well, sure. As a an active member of the community, I've been in a lot of organizations, civic organizations that help with all kinds of things. But I mean, obviously, the biggest one in my life is my church, the First United Methodist Church. But I've been very active in community groups. Like I was initially on the board and helped establish the King Center, which is a social services organization based in South Frankfort to reach out and help kids in the South Frankfort neighborhood and community with educational opportunities, with growth opportunities, and it's become a real great community center that has helped nurture children in that area and helped them to succeed in school and succeed in life. And the King Center was set up by my friend Randy Bacon, who I worked with at LRC and went to church with at the Methodist Church. And Randy's vision was to have a organization right in the community where kids could come after school during the summers and get good guidance and good leadership and engage in positive things that would help them in school and help them in life. His idea, he named it the King Center because he said that there were three kings that were part of that example that he wanted to set. One was Peggy King, who was a longtime employee of the Legislative Research Commission and a very active member of the community, who died tragically in a horrible crime.
Right.
And then the other one was Martin Luther King, who who has inspired so many people. With his example, and again, I think Randy wanted to promote this idea that we should be judged not by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. And the King Center is really set up to help kids develop good character. And then the third king in Randy's vision was the King of Kings, Jesus Christ. So he named it the King's Center with the idea of honoring the different kings in his life who had set that kind of an example. And it's helped hundreds of kids and really, I think, become a great force in the community. Of course, I've also been active in, I would say, in the last 10 years, the most important civic involvements I've had have been in connection with our drug court, which is kind of part of my official duties. But in addition, I have helped to set up community support groups that work with our drug court, like Yes Arts, which you may be familiar with. It's a great art program that we originally established in order to help people in drug court to express themselves in a positive way and learn to deal with, so often, drug addiction is tied to traumatic experiences that people have had. Whether they've been sexually abused or had been physically abused as kids, that those kinds of traumatic experiences often lead to drug abuse. And, a lot of people just have a very difficult time, in the old traditional talk therapy of talking about those experiences.
Right.
But a lot of those people can express themselves in art to open up maybe some of the problems that have caused them to develop an addiction. So that was the original vision of the Yes Arts program.
Right, yeah.
And it's continued, and now it's kind of broadened its outreach to really focus on children, which again I think is a wonderful way for them to grow. And so I've been very supportive of that group as well.
Well, there's a lot of good things going on in our community, and I just love when people who run for office are involved in those things that are happening.
Yeah, no, there's just a lot of positive energy to really help our community deal with these problems.
Sure,
So.
sure. Well, being a judge, I know there's a lot of different things that you have to deal with, and surely there are certain skills that you have to have. What do you think is the most important skill that a judge needs to possess?
Well, honestly, I would say the most important skill for a judge is the ability to treat everybody with dignity and respect. People don't come to court who don't have problems. Everybody that we see in court is going through some difficult time in their life, some kind of trauma, and almost everybody who comes before the court has got a really important backstory that we don't know when we first open up that case file. So it's really important that when you're sitting there as a judge, that you not prejudge anybody by their race or by their creed or by their political affiliation. It's important that you recognize that every person is entitled to dignity and respect, and every person's got a story to tell. And I think if you keep that in mind, it's going to guide you into making fair decisions, making impartial decisions, and I think that's probably the number one characteristic that you need to have as a good judge. Now, there are many others, but I would say another one, honestly, is the ability to acknowledge that we all make mistakes, and certainly judges are no different than anybody else. And so I think it's helpful to have a little bit of sense of humility about your work. And that's really why we have a court system. Nobody has got a monopoly on the truth. Nobody has got a monopoly on what's right. And as judges, I think we learn from the parties who are in front of us, and we make the best decision we have. But we have a system that's set up so there's appellate review. Appellate courts are going to review many of our decisions. And great judges and great lawyers often disagree about what the law is going to be. So you learn how to study the issues and do your best, and then try to be fair to everybody.
Okay. Oftentimes, routine discovery orders are not complied with by the Commonwealth in circuit court. Specifically turning over reports in high-profile cases within the discovery deadline. How do you plan to enforce your own court orders to ensure the Commonwealth is held to the orders you enter?
Well, I think all parties have to be held to that standard. So we have an adversary system where you've got lawyers for the defendants and lawyers for the Commonwealth, and they all need to be held to that standard. So, I would say in any case, if there's a defendant who thinks, or a lawyer for a defendant who thinks the Commonwealth has not complied, they need to bring that in front of the court, and we'll deal with it.
Okay.
But we also, I will say this with regard to the prosecution of cases in Franklin County. We have a tradition of essentially open file discovery, which means that the Commonwealth attorney generally turns over all the evidence they've got to the defendant. Now, there are some cases where there are reasons where some documents are privileged. A lot of times it's in cases involving involving sexual abuse, for example, where the victim's rights have to be respected. And in those cases, we've got to be sensitive to the rights of victims. But all the information needs to be shared, and it's our commitment to make that happen. So if somebody thinks that the Commonwealth's holding back on information, they just need to bring that to court, and we'll deal with it.
Okay. Here's a fun question. Do you ever wake up in the middle of the night thinking about a case and wishing you had handled something differently?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because, all the the cases, I will say this, the cases that are the toughest cases are the cases with such, grave human consequences.
Right.
And, I would say 90% of our criminal docket is as a result of drug cases. We have a drug epidemic in this country and in this state and certainly in this community. And so dealing with that through the criminal justice system is a big challenge. So I absolutely agonize, over many of those decisions. And I can tell you, when you have to apply the law in a situation where drugs are involved, the law says that defendants are entitled to a presumption of innocence, and we have to uphold that principle as well. But I have had cases, where a defendant has sought to be released from custody in a pretrial situation before the trial has been held, and presumptively defendants are entitled to a release from trial. But there's a drug problem involved.
Right.
And I have had cases where someone has been released from custody pending a trial and then died of a drug overdose. So those are the cases that cause me to lose sleep at
Sure,
night.
yeah.
I don't really lose sleep at night at all about the cases involving the governor or the legislature. They have great lawyers and they can fend for themselves,
Yeah.
and the cases will ultimately go up to the appellate courts. But the human consequences of these cases involving the drug epidemic are the most troubling and the most difficult, I think, for any judge.
What injustices have you witnessed in or outside the courtroom, and what was your response to those events?
Well, that's kind of a broad question.
It is. Take it as you will.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, life is full of injustice, and certainly, that's one of the things we try to address in the court system. And again, our main goal in the court system is to treat everybody with fairness and with impartiality. But I think one of the challenging things is that we've talked about how big an impact the drug epidemic has in our criminal justice system, and I would say that the biggest injustice that troubles me is the inability of our criminal justice system to adequately address the drug epidemic, because in many ways the drug epidemic is a public health crisis as much as it is a criminal justice crisis. And the tools we have in the criminal justice system are really not adequate to get at the underlying cause of the drug problem. Why do people turn to drugs? Well, they turn to drugs a lot of times because they're hopeless and because they've been abused and because there's trauma in their life experiences, and the criminal justice system doesn't have a really great way to deal with that. Now we're working on that, and I think drug court has been one of the best tools we have to try to get at those underlying problems, but it's an imperfect tool. So
Right. In your career, has there been an instance where you faced an ethical dilemma, and how did you resolve it?
Well, again, that's kind of a broad question. So, yeah, I mean, I think we're all faced with ethical
Sure.
dilemmas
Yeah.
every day. So, certainly my approach to that is, I always try to do the right thing. And again, as a judge, it's so important that you hear the arguments of both sides, and then you try to do what's right within the bounds of the law. So there are cases that come up where, what you would like to see happen or what you think would be the most ethical thing to happen sometimes is not within the bounds of the law. So in those cases, you may have to issue a ruling that if it was up to you personally, you might do something differently. But, those are the tough decisions, I think, as a judge when, sometimes you're required to do something that may be at odds with your personal ethical beliefs, but it's required by the law.
Okay. Do you think judges have an obligation to improve public understanding of the courts? And if so, how should they carry out that
Yeah.
obligation?
Well, certainly I think that is part of a judge's obligation. And I think, the primary way we do that is by the way we conduct our court proceedings. And, everything a judge does, every ruling that a judge makes is public record. So I think when we write an opinion or we issue an order, that's an opportunity to try to explain to the public what the basis for the ruling is. And that's really the primary method, I think, of public education. But we certainly need to also be active in the community, at schools and churches and civic clubs, in answering questions and in trying to explain how the legal system works, because it's foreign to many people, have no firsthand dealings with the legal system. And I think as citizens, it's important for all of us to learn more about how the court system works. And I think judges need to play a part in that.
Okay. What would you consider to be your greatest accomplishment in your career?
Well, in my career, I don't know. I'll let maybe let others judge that. I would say I think the greatest accomplishment that anybody can have as a citizen, is to be a good parent. And I really feel like that if I've made a contribution to the community, the first thing that I've tried to do is to be a good parent. And then in my work, we've dealt with many, many high-profile cases. But the underlying principle that I think I would like to be remembered for is that I'm a judge who believes in the principle that everybody was created equal, that everybody is entitled to a fair shake, and that everybody who comes before the court that I'm presiding over is going to get treated with dignity and with respect, and that whether you agree or disagree, I hope people leave our courthouse thinking that they were treated fairly.
Okay. Well, they're telling me we're done, so
Okay.
I'm going to turn it over to you and let you address our viewers directly
Okay,
and tell them
great.
why they need to vote for you on November 8th.
Well, Kathy, thank you so much for the opportunity to share a little bit about this race and about the importance of the Franklin Circuit Court. I am asking for the vote of every voter in Franklin County, because the Franklin Circuit Court is so critical to our community and also to our state. It's important as a place where everybody can be treated fairly, but it's also important in state government as a place where decisions about legislation are made and where the independence of the court is honored. So our system of checks and balances doesn't really work unless we've got an independent court system. My pledge has been to keep the court system independent, which is why I will not accept contributions from politicians and elected officials or from political parties, so that those decisions in Franklin Circuit Court will be independent and will honor the system of checks and balances that was bequeathed to us by the founders of this country and of this Constitution we have in Kentucky. So those are the reasons why I would like to have everybody support me, and I ask for your vote, and I appreciate the opportunity to share with you all today.
Well, we appreciate you coming to share with us your views about this position and about our community and how we can all be working towards making it better. That's why we're here. We're here to inform the voters because it is election season, and we're here to get informed and want to encourage you to go vote on November 8th. And after you go vote, go home and turn it on Channel 10, and we'll be having live election results coming to you from the county clerk's office. It's election season, so that means that it's time to get informed And remember that your vote is your voice, so use it. Thank you.